Welcome, traveler, standing at the threshold of the night. Have you ever wondered why, when your body is utterly exhausted, your mind erupts like a river in flood? That is the moment when the personal unconscious begins to speak. Forgotten memories, old regrets, and the fragments of the shadow you have tried to bury throughout the day now rise up, turning your bedroom into a prison of overthinking. Carl Jung once warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The exhaustion you carry is not merely physical. It is the consequence of a mind endlessly shouldering stones that were never meant to be yours, the burdens of memories that have not yet been transformed. Hello, I am Milo, and I will accompany you tonight on a journey into the hidden depths of the soul. This video is not merely a set of words meant to lure you into sleep. It is a journey across the river on a raft of wisdom. Together, we will clean the glass of the lighthouse of awareness so you may recognize your original face, the true self that has always been calm and whole beneath every mask. It is time to set the raft of anxiety down. Allow the fragments of memory to be mended through understanding, and let your mind finally find its way home in absolute rest. Take a deep breath. You are enough, and you have always been enough. The personal unconscious, the secret library of a human life. Yes, exactly so. When Carl Gustav Jung spoke of the personal unconscious, he did not describe it as a dark place to be conquered, but as a living archive of a human life, a place where every experience that has ever touched us leaves a trace, whether consciousness remembers it or not. If consciousness is the room in which you are now sitting, reading under a lamp, then the personal unconscious is the entire library behind the wall, silent, yet filled with books that were once opened, once closed, and once forgotten. Throughout our lives, we continuously choose what is allowed to remain in the light of consciousness and what must be pushed out of it. Painful memories, emotions that feel too intense, conflicts the ego cannot bear. All of these do not disappear. They simply withdraw. Jung described this as a natural defensive mechanism of the psyche. For the unconscious is not just evil by nature. It is also the source of the highest good. The personal unconscious is not our enemy. It is the keeper of memory when we are not yet ready to face it. This is why there are days when you do not understand why you react so strongly to an offhand remark, why an unfamiliar scent suddenly makes your heart sink, or why a fleeting image carries with it a nameless sadness. This is not weakness. These are books in the unconscious library that have just been touched. They open not to wound you, but to remind you that something within you is still waiting to be recognized. Jung emphasized that the personal unconscious is formed primarily from individual experience, distinct from the collective unconscious, which is universal in nature. It contains deeply personal fragments of life, your childhood moments of rejection, happiness you never quite found words for, and even thoughts you once judged as unacceptable. Precisely those things deemed inappropriate become repressed sources of energy, quietly influencing your behavior, your choices, and your emotions. As Jung famously wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This sentence is not a threatening warning, but a profoundly human invitation. For when the unconscious remains unseen, it speaks on your behalf through anxiety, dreams, emotional reflexes, and chronic exhaustion. Modern human beings are often worn down, not because they lack sleep, but because they are constantly fighting themselves. We try to live as if the past does not exist, as if buried memories no longer matter. But the psyche does not operate through denial. In Jung's view, the personal unconscious is like an underground river. You may build your house on the surface and pretend it is not there, but the current continues to flow beneath. When blocked for too long, it finds another way out, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through depression, sometimes through an inexplicable sense of emptiness. And if we are brave enough to listen, these manifestations cease to be problems and become messages. What matters is this: the personal unconscious does not demand that you dig or analyze everything immediately. Jung did not advocate forcing memories to surface. On the contrary, he emphasized respect for the psyche's own rhythm. There are books that should only be read when you have matured enough to understand them. There are memories that need only to be acknowledged as having existed without yet being explained. Within this context, sleep becomes a unique doorway. When the ego loosens its grip, the personal unconscious gains space to regulate itself. Jung regarded dreams as a natural balancing mechanism of the psyche, a place where what was neglected during the day returns in the form of images, symbols, and feelings. He wrote, "Dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, not for you to decode with logic, but to feel, to allow old fragments of life to exist without judgment." Thus, when Jung referred to the personal unconscious as the secret library of a human life, he was not urging you to read every book. It is enough to know that they are there, and that you do not need to fear them, For within that library lies not only pain, but unlived potential parts of yourself you once had to abandon in order to adapt. Jung believed one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Tonight, as you close your eyes, allow that library to rest. Do not try to remember. Do not try to understand. Simply acknowledge that there is more within you than you have ever allowed yourself to see. And in that acknowledgement, the mind begins to rest. Not because everything has been resolved, but because you no longer need to run from yourself. When we begin to recognize that the personal unconscious is not a chaotic, dark zone, but a living library of a human life, a natural question arises. Why are there books in that library that disappear from the reach of consciousness? Why do some memories fade with time, while others are tightly locked away, forbidding us to touch them? It is precisely at this intersection that Carl Gustav Jung leads us toward a subtle yet decisive distinction: natural forgetting and repression. 2. The art of forgetting, normal forgetting, and repression. In everyday life, we often regard forgetting as a failure of memory, a sign of decline, aging, or inattention. But from the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, forgetting is not merely unavoidable. It is a natural art of the soul. Just as a garden must be pruned to make space for new growth, the human mind must also release impressions that have completed their task. Not every memory needs to be carried for a lifetime, and not every experience needs to remain in the light of consciousness. Jung drew a clear distinction between forgetting, normal forgetting, and repression. Normal forgetting occurs when an experience has lost its emotional charge. It gradually recedes into the psychological background, not because it is forbidden, but because it is no longer necessary for the ego's present orientation. This is a healthy process of purification, preventing consciousness from being overwhelmed by countless details of the past. In this case, the personal unconscious functions like a devoted librarian, placing rarely used books deeper on the shelves so that the reading desk remains uncluttered. Repression, however, is entirely different. Repression occurs when a psychological content memory, emotion impulse, still carries strong emotional energy, yet is deemed unacceptable by the ego. It is too painful, too conflictual, or too incompatible with the image we wish to maintain of ourselves. In such cases, the content is not stored away naturally, but pushed beneath the threshold of consciousness through the ego's invisible effort. Jung did not view this as a moral or immoral act. He understood it as a survival reflex of the soul. The problem is this: what is repressed never truly disappears. It remains alive, charged with energy, and continually seeks expression. Jung stated plainly, the unconscious is not just evil by nature. It is also the source of the highest good. This means that even repressed memories, no matter how painful or shameful, are not the mind's waste. They are fragments of life that have not yet been integrated, experiences that have not found their rightful place within your personal story. For this reason, many people live in a quiet inner contradiction. During the day, they believe they have forgotten. Yet at night, they cannot sleep deeply. Recurring dreams, disproportionate emotional reactions, unexplained anxiety, all may be signs that something has been repressed rather than released. Jung warned that when the unconscious is ignored for too long, it will find its own way to speak. And when it does, we often mistake that voice for fate. He wrote his famous line, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In this context, forgetting is no longer a simple function of memory, but becomes an inner ethical boundary. We do not merely forget things, we decide what is allowed to be forgotten. Repression occurs when the ego builds Udin's rigid walls to protect its self-image, whereas natural forgetting arises when the soul trusts, "I am safe enough to let this go." Jung did not encourage the reckless destruction of those walls. He understood that the ego needs them to survive. Yet he also pointed out a profound paradox. The very walls erected to protect us are often what exhaust us the most. Maintaining repression requires constant energy. We must remain vigilant, controlling, avoiding. Over time, this tension accumulates, manifesting as mental exhaustion, depression, or an inexplicable sense of emptiness. Here, sleep assumes the role of a silent mediator. When consciousness loosens its grip, the ego's walls lose their daytime solidity. Jung regarded dreams as a self-regulating mechanism of the psyche, where repressed contents can emerge in symbolic form, not to attack, but to be seen. He once wrote, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul, not for you to analyze every detail, but to allow them to exist within the safe space of sleep." Thus, the art of forgetting in Jung's thought is not about learning how to erase memory, but about learning to distinguish between what has been completed and what has not yet been fully lived. Normal forgetting is the wisdom of the mind. Prolonged repression is the soul's cry for recognition. When you grasp this difference, you stop blaming yourself for not being able to forget and begin to ask a deeper question. What within me is asking to be acknowledged rather than eliminated? Tonight, as you gradually sink into sleep, let that question remain as a gentle whisper. No immediate answer is required. Jung reminded us, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And sometimes the first step toward that is not digging into the darkness, but simply stopping the construction of new walls. Sleep, in its quiet intelligence, will know what to do next. Once we begin to distinguish between natural forgetting and memories that have been repressed into the shadows, a deeper truth gradually reveals itself. What is pushed into the unconscious does not remain passive or inert. These contents are not merely dormant memories. They reorganize, connect with one another, accumulate emotional energy, and from this process emerge psychological structures with a life of their own. It is precisely at this point that Carl Jung leads us to one of his most unsettling discoveries: complexes. 3. Autonomous soul fragments. Understanding complexes. In his exploration of the personal unconscious, Jung soon realized that the human psyche is not a simple, unified whole. Beneath the seemingly seamless surface of the ego exist psychological islands, clusters of memories, images and emotions bound tightly together by a strong emotional charge. Jung called these clusters complexes. He did not regard complexes as pathological concepts, but as universal facts of psychological life. He stated plainly, complexes are in fact the living units of the unconscious psyche. Each complex is like an autonomous fragment of the soul, carrying its own history, its own voice, and sometimes its own will. Complexes do not require the permission of consciousness to operate. When activated, a complex can temporarily seize control of our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. You may be calm and rational until a word, a glance, or a familiar situation suddenly touches an old complex. In that instant, your reaction no longer resembles your present self, but a younger, more wounded version of you, as though time itself has been bent. Jung discovered complexes early in his career through word association experiments. He observed that when a stimulus word touched the core of a complex participant's responses became disrupted, they stammered, forgot words, reacted slowly, or expressed emotions out of proportion to the situation. From this, Jung concluded that complexes behave like small personalities within the psyche. And he wrote, complexes interfere with the intentions of the will and disturb the conscious performance. They produce disturbances of memory and blockages in the flow of associations. What is striking is that complexes do not form randomly. They usually arise from psychological shocks, especially in childhood, when the ego is still fragile and lacks the capacity to process conflict. A child who experiences emotional abandonment may develop an abandonment complex. A child raised under excessive control may carry an inferiority complex or a power complex. These experiences do not disappear with time. They become frozen in the unconscious, retaining their original emotional intensity, and wait for similar circumstances in the present to reactivate them. For this reason, adults are often surprised by their own overreactions. Rationally, they know the present situation is not severe, yet emotionally, it erupts as if it were a matter of survival. Jung explained that in such moments, it is not the present ego that is reacting, but the complex speaking through it. And when a complex takes over, consciousness is pulled back into the past. Jung captured this sharply when he wrote, "As long as a complex is active, it puts a stamp of fate upon our life." This helps explain why many people feel they are repeating the same script in relationships at work or in how they treat themselves. It is not because they lack willpower, but because an unrecognized, unconscious part is still steering the course. Complexes are not evil. The danger arises only when we are unaware that they are influencing us. In that state, we believe our reactions are entirely reasonable, that they reflect our true self, when in fact they are echoes of an old wound. Jung emphasized strongly that complexes should not be destroyed. They are psychological realities, and every attempt to suppress them only strengthens their activity. He wrote, "One does not get rid of complexes, but one learns to live with them." Learning to live with complexes does not mean surrender. It means recognition and dialogue. When a complex is seen named and placed within its proper historical context, its controlling power gradually diminishes. It ceases to be a usurper and becomes part of the broader narrative of one's life. In this process, dreams and inner images play a particularly important role. Complexes often appear in dreams as recurring figures: the abandoned child, the strict father, the inner judge, or the rescuer. Jung did not see these images as random products, but as living symbols of complexes. He once said, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul." Thus, within the context of sleep, when the ego temporarily withdraws, complexes can emerge without direct confrontation. They do not come to sabotage sleep, but to be acknowledged. And paradoxically, when they are gently acknowledged, complexes often soften. Inner tension decreases, and sleep becomes deeper rather than more disturbed. Understanding complexes is a crucial turning point in the Jungian journey. It allows us to stop blaming ourselves for out-of-control reactions and begin seeing them as signals from our inner history. Jung did not promise that this path would be easy, but he affirmed that it leads toward psychological maturity. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites." Tonight, as you allow your mind to drift into sleep, remember that these autonomous fragments of the soul within you are not your enemies. They are parts of you that once carried burdens on your behalf when you were too young to understand what was happening. And simply recognizing their existence is already a profound step on the path of returning to yourself. When we begin to realize that within us exist autonomous fragments of the soul, complexes with their own lives, their own memories, and their own emotions, a deeper question naturally arises. How do these unconscious parts communicate with us? If they do not speak in words, do not argue through reason, then by what path do they seek to be heard? It is here that Carl Gustav Jung leads us into a deeper layer of the psyche, the language of symbols. 4. The language of symbols. When the unconscious speaks. Carl Gustav Jung recognized early on that the unconscious does not operate according to the logic of consciousness. It does not reason, explain, or arrange itself in linear cause and effect sequences like our waking intellect. Instead, the unconscious speaks through images, sensations, and symbols, a language older than words, closer to poetry than to science. Jung wrote a statement foundational to his entire analytical psychology. The unconscious can only be reached by a symbolic mode of expression. This means that whenever you attempt to understand the unconscious through pure rationality, you are standing at the wrong door. The unconscious does not need to be dissected. It needs to be listened to. And symbols are its most natural voice. The strange images that appear in dreams, a dark road, an old house, deep water, a lost child, or a mysterious figure, are not random byproducts of a tired brain. From a Jungian perspective, they are living messages reflecting the true state of your psyche in the present moment. Jung asserted, "Dreams are the direct expression of unconscious psychic activity. What matters most is this: symbols do not have fixed meanings. An image may carry different meanings for different individuals because it arises from their personal history." Jung clearly distinguished between a sign and a symbol. A sign points to something already known. A symbol points to something not yet fully understood. He wrote, "A symbol is always the best possible expression for something unknown." Therefore, when you dream of an image that confuses you, this is not a failure of the dream. It is the very nature of symbolism. Symbols do not arrive to deliver clear answers. They arrive to open an inner space where emotion, memory, and intuition can coexist. When we force a symbol to explain itself, we inadvertently impose the logic of consciousness upon a realm that does not belong to it. Jung observed that symbols often carry powerful psychic energy. A single dream image can linger with us throughout the day, while real-life events pass without impact. This is not because symbols are irrational, but because they touch directly the deeper layers where complexes and repressed memories reside. A symbol functions like a key perfectly fitted to the lock of the unconscious, unlocking emotions that language cannot reach. In modern life, we are taught to distrust images, to control emotion, and to prioritize reason. Jung believed that this imbalance is the source of many psychological disturbances. He wrote with sharp clarity, "The more one-sided consciousness becomes, the more the unconscious is activated. When consciousness becomes too rigid and overly rational, the unconscious seeks compensation, often through dreams and symbols. Unusual dreams are not signs that something is wrong, but expressions of the psyche's self-regulating effort. They arrive to say that something within you has been neglected, misaligned, or is asking to be seen from a different perspective. Jung did not encourage decoding symbols through fixed dictionaries. He opposed mechanical interpretations where water equals emotion, or a house equals the self. For Jung, what mattered was not what a symbol means, but what it evokes within you. He wrote, "The dream asks a question which must be answered by the dreamer himself. Here the dream is not a puzzle demanding a correct solution, but an inner dialogue. When you allow images to exist without rushing to analyze them, a subtle shift occurs. The mind softens, emotions relax, and sleep deepens. This happens because you are no longer trying to control the unconscious, you are cooperating with it. Within the context of sleep, symbols act as silent messengers. They do not knock loudly, they whisper. For this reason, Jung emphasized approaching symbols with respect and humility. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To make the darkness conscious does not mean shining a spotlight upon it, but sitting quietly beside it long enough for it to reveal itself. Symbols require space, slowness, and an ego that is not overly defensive. Sleep is the most natural state in which this can occur." Thus, when Jung spoke of the language of symbols, he was not referring to a psychological technique, but to a way of living with the psyche. It is the capacity to accept that not everything must be understood immediately, and not every question requires an answer. Some messages only need to be listened to until they naturally settle. Tonight, as you close your eyes, if an image appears, whether vivid or vague, allow it to remain. Do not rush to dismiss it, and do not rush to explain it. Jung believed that it is precisely in this moment of releasing the effort to understand that the psyche truly finds rest. And in that rest, the unconscious has finished saying what it needed to say. When we accept that the unconscious speaks in symbols rather than in reason, and that the images in dreams are not random, but whispers of the soul, another question gradually emerges. What awakens these symbols? What causes a particular image, emotion, or dream to appear tonight, rather than on another night? At a deeper level of Jungian psychology, the answer lies in influences so subtle that we often fail to notice them. The invisible nudges of everyday life. 5. Invisible nudges, triggers, and subliminal sensations. Human beings often believe that they respond to the world consciously. We see, we hear, we think, and then we feel. Yet Carl Gustav Jung recognized early on that much of our psychological life does not operate in this order. Many reactions, memories, and emotions are initiated by stimuli that lie below the threshold of conscious awareness, what he and later psychologists called subliminal. Jung observed, the unconscious reacts not only to what is consciously perceived, but also to impressions which are barely noticed or entirely ignored. These subliminal sensations are not loud or obvious. They do not knock on the door of consciousness. They slip inside. A fleeting scent, a distant melody, the afternoon light falling on an old wall, or the way someone turns their back while speaking. All of these can become triggers, small yet powerful sparks. They touch layers of dormant memory, especially those charged with strong emotion from childhood. Jung once recounted a well-known case. A middle-aged professor was suddenly drawn into a childhood memory simply by the faint scent of geese. He did not consciously register the smell, but the unconscious did. In an instant, an entire former life scene. Long ago afternoons, a sense of safety or an unnamed sadness rose to the surface. Jung did not see this as a weakness of memory, but as evidence of a profound truth. The unconscious listens to the world more attentively than consciousness does. What gives these nudges their power lies not in the stimulus itself, but in the emotional link attached to it. A scent is not merely a scent. It is a doorway into a moment in life when the ego was not yet strong enough to protect itself. A sound is not merely a sound. It may be the echo of a moment that once mattered deeply. Jung wrote, "Emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious." It is emotion, not logic, that engraves an experience deeply into the unconscious. And for this reason, subliminal stimuli charged with emotion awaken the unconscious far more quickly than any rational argument. In modern life, we are surrounded by countless stimuli, yet we are trained to ignore them. We learn to pay no attention, to not be so sensitive, to stop overthinking. Jung believed, however, that this disregard is effective only at the level of consciousness. The unconscious does not forget. It records everything, especially what we deliberately refuse to see. He stated bluntly, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate." Invisible nudges are therefore often mistaken for randomness, a sudden sadness with no apparent cause, a night of unusually deep dreams despite an ordinary day. But from a Jungian perspective, nothing is without cause. Small details of the day, a glance, a passing remark, an image sliding across a screen, have planted seeds in the unconscious. And when consciousness loosens its grip in sleep, those seeds germinate as dreams, emotions, or intuitions. What is noteworthy is that subliminal nudges are neither inherently positive nor negative. A gentle memory may also be awakened, carrying an inexplicable sense of calm. Jung did not regard the unconscious merely as a repository of trauma. He saw it as the source of the entire life of the soul. He wrote, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good." Thus, when an unexpected emotion arises that you cannot explain, it is not necessarily a sign of disorder. It may be a sign that your inner life is moving. Problems arise only when we rush to label, to dismiss, or to analyze these experiences purely through reason. Jung believed that doing so often disrupts the psyche's delicate process of self-regulation. Within the context of sleep, these invisible nudges act as silent guides. They do not determine dream content mechanically. Rather, they suggest themes the soul needs to work through. A scent associated with safety may lead to a healing dream. A vague discomfort may open a dream that confronts an old complex. Jung saw this not as dysfunction, but as the psyche's natural intelligence. He wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system that maintains itself in equilibrium. Understanding the role of triggers and subliminal sensations changes the way we live. We stop treating unexplainable reactions as enemies and begin to see them as signals. We learn to slow down to become more sensitive to what unfolds during the day, not to control it, but to respect it. For every small detail may be a message from the unconscious delivered quietly and deeply. Tonight, as you lie down, and allow your mind to drift into sleep. Remember that your dreams do not arise from nothingness. They are woven from moments you may not even remember experiencing. And in that stillness, the invisible nudges have completed their work, not to awaken you, but to guide you closer to yourself. Once we recognize that the invisible nudges of everyday life, scents, sounds fleeting, glances, can silently activate the deeper contents of the unconscious, an even subtler truth begins to emerge. The unconscious does not speak to us only through dreams or vague sensations. At times, it steps directly into our daytime speech, writing, and actions, right in the midst of moments when we believe ourselves to be fully awake and in control. It is at this delicate boundary that Carl Gustav Jung, alongside Sigmund Freud, identified a phenomenon that appears minor, yet carries profound meaning: intentional errors. 6. Intentional errors. The ego's unintended confessions. In everyday life, we are accustomed to treating slips of the tongue writing mistakes, or forgetting a familiar name, as embarrassing carelessness. We apologize, correct ourselves, and quickly move on. But from Jung's perspective, such faulty acts are rarely meaningless. They are brief openings through which the unconscious seizes the chance to speak, while the ego is preoccupied with controlling its image before the world. Jung continued and expanded Freud's initial discovery of parapraxis, small errors in speech and action. Yet unlike Freud's primarily drive-based approach, Jung perceived something broader: the purposeful intervention of the psyche. He wrote, "The unconscious knows more than consciousness does." This concise statement contains an unsettling truth for the ego. There is a part within you that understands your motives, emotions, and conflicts better than you do. And when that part is not heard through other channels, it will seek the shortest path, sometimes through a word misspoken, a name forgotten at precisely the right moment, or a sentence that accidentally slips onto the page. What makes these errors noteworthy lies not in the mistake itself, but in its timing and content. You do not forget a name at random. You forget the name of someone toward whom you harbor an unacknowledged ambivalence. You call someone by another name, not because your memory is weak, but because the unconscious has linked two psychological images that consciousness is trying to keep apart. Jung observed, complexes interfere with the intentions of the will and disturb the conscious performance. Here, the complex acts like a gentle push from behind the stage. When activated, it derails the ego's plan, revealing a fragment of hidden truth. The paradox is this: the harder one tries to remain proper, the more likely errors are to occur. Maintaining a mask consumes energy, and the unconscious never fully consents to prolonged pretense. Jung viewed these faulty acts as unintended confessions. They do not arise to shame you, but to bring information into the light. In many cases, it is precisely these moments of slipping that help individuals recognize inner conflicts they have avoided for years. Jung wrote, "There is no such thing as a chance event." This statement does not deny physical randomness. Rather, it emphasizes that in psychological life, every manifestation carries meaning. When an error occurs, the Jungian question is not, "Why am I so stupid?" but "What within me just tried to be expressed?" Importantly intentional. Errors do not always carry negative content. At times, they are gentle acts of resistance by a neglected part of the self. A truthful remark that escapes during polite conversation, a genuine emotion that surfaces when you intended to appear strong. These too are the unconscious reclaiming its right to exist. Jung did not see this as the ego's failure, but as an opportunity for the ego to mature. Yet the common human reflex is to correct and deny. We laugh it off, apologize, and quickly patch the mask. Jung argued that this reflex, though understandable, prolongs inner division. Each time we dismiss a meaningful error, we reinforce the belief that certain parts of ourselves are not allowed to exist. And it is precisely this exclusion that feeds psychological tension. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In this context, darkness does not refer to grave wrongdoing. It may be as simple as an unapproved emotion or a thought that conflicts with the image we wish to maintain. Intentional errors are the way the darkness knocks very softly, very briefly, before retreating. If we are subtle enough to notice not to analyze harshly, but to acknowledge a small reconciliation has already begun. Jung emphasized that reconciliation with the unconscious does not occur through self-punishment, but through compassionate curiosity. When an error happens, simply pausing to ask, "What is this reflecting within me?" already diminishes the unconscious's controlling power. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites." Faulty acts thus become gateways to the process of integration. They help the ego realize that it is not the sole owner of the psyche, but a steward who must learn to listen to other inner voices. Once this relationship is established, the unconscious no longer needs to intrude through frequent errors. Within the context of sleep, daytime errors continue their life as images and emotions in dreams. What the unconscious cannot say in words while awake, it will express through symbols when consciousness relaxes. Jung regarded this as a natural continuity of psychological life, not as two separate worlds. He wrote, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul. Therefore, as you prepare to drift into sleep, remember that the errors of the day do not need to be corrected in memory. They have fulfilled their role, delivering a signal. If you do not rush to push it away, that signal will settle, and the mind can rest without the strain of performance. Tonight, if you recall a moment of a slip of the tongue or a lapse of memory, try to view it not with shame, but with gentleness. For it may well have been the moment when the true self behind the mask whispered, 'I am here too.' And only when that whisper is acknowledged will it fall silent, not because it has been forced to, but because it has finally been heard. When we learn to listen to intentional errors, those moments when the unconscious intrudes into speech and action, to confess itself, another truth gradually comes into view. The unconscious intervenes, not only to reveal what has been hidden, but also to create what has never yet been named. If errors are the unconscious breaking the mask, then creativity is the way it rearranges memory to open a new path. At this threshold, Carl Gustav Jung introduces a subtle and paradoxical concept, Cryptomnesia. 7. Cryptomnesia. When memory is reborn as an idea. There are moments when we believe we have grasped a completely new idea, a phrase that arrives unexpectedly, a melody that rises in silence, a fresh way of seeing a familiar problem. The feeling is real vivid and convincing. Yet Jung cautioned that the newness of consciousness does not necessarily mean the never-before existence of the unconscious. He called this phenomenon cryptomnesia, when a forgotten memory returns in the form of an idea, while consciousness no longer recognizes its source. Jung did not regard cryptomnesia as intellectual dishonesty, nor as a moral failing. He understood it as a natural mode of the creative psyche. The unconscious for Jung is not a passive storehouse. It is a living matrix in which fragments of memory, emotion, and image are continuously reconfigured. He wrote, "The creative process has a feminine quality. It is a process of gestation, not of invention. Creativity, therefore, is not necessarily invention from nothingness, but gestation, an unseen ripening of what has once touched our lives." In Cryptomnesia, the unconscious borrows pages, once read melodies, once heard images, once glimpsed, and then blends them into a new order. What leads us to believe the idea is entirely new is not that the content has never existed, but that the connections between old fragments are new. Jung recognized that the unconscious possesses an associative capacity far beyond that of consciousness because it is not bound by linear logic. He once said, "The unconscious is not bound by time or space." This freedom allows the unconscious to connect past and future in a single intuitive moment. This explains why many ideas arrive just before sleep, or in the half-waking, half-dreaming state. When the ego is tired and loosens its control, the unconscious gains space for creative activity. No longer needing the permission of reason, it assembles fragments of life in its own way, then sends them up to the surface of consciousness like a flash of lightning. Jung regarded this as the expression of a deeper intelligence, and he wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos in all disorder, a secret order. Cryptomnesia, therefore, does not diminish the value of creativity. On the contrary, it multiplies its meaning. It reminds us that every idea is a continuous current, not a singular point of origin. Human beings do not create from zero. They create from a life that has been lived. What we call new is often a transformed return, and the unconscious is the workshop of that transformation." Jung was particularly attentive to the psychological consequences of cryptomnesia. When her consciousness claims an idea as entirely its own, the ego may swell a state he called inflation. But when we understand that an idea is the product of a deeper process, we learn creative humility. Jung warned, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Creativity is not meant to affirm the ego, but to move beyond it." Conversely, cryptomnesia also frees us from the fear of not being creative enough. If the unconscious is a continuously creative matrix, then creative drought often comes not from a lack of talent, but from excessive control. When we force ourselves to come up with something new, we block the unconscious. Jung believed the right attitude is to listen and to wait. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Here, the darkness is also the store of forgotten memory, the raw material of creativity. Cryptomnesia further reveals a consoling truth. What we have loved, learned, and felt, though seemingly lost, continues to work on our behalf. The unconscious remembers in its own way without needing the permission of deliberate memory. And when the time is ripe, it returns these contents in a form suited to the present. Jung believed this to be an expression of the psyche's self-regulation. The psyche is a self-regulating system. Within the context of sleep, cryptomnesia becomes especially gentle. The vague thoughts before sleep, hovering phrases, unfinished images, may be the meeting point between distant memory and future possibility. There is no need to grasp them tightly. Simply let them drift. The unconscious will will continue its work through the night. Jung once wrote, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." And sometimes they are also the drafts of tomorrow's ideas. Therefore, when you wonder whether an idea is truly new, Jung invites you to change the question, not how new it is, but how true it is to your inner process. For an idea that arrives at the right moment, though woven from old threads, still carries the vitality of the new. Cryptomnesia, in this sense, is the unconscious's fidelity. Fidelity to the life that has been lived and to the future that is taking shape. Tonight, as you allow your mind to settle, if a fragile thought appears, do not rush to capture it, nor to judge it. Let it be what it is, a small bridge between what has been and what is coming. And in that silence, the unconscious will continue its quiet work, rebirthing memory into meaning. Childhood memories, burden, or miracle. If cryptomnesia shows us that the unconscious can rebirth a memory as a new idea, it also raises a gentle yet profound question. Which memories are the deepest sources feeding that creative current? Jung would say, most often they are very early memories, the first fragments of life formed before we had language to name emotion. And precisely because they are so early, so fragile, many of those life fragments become gaps in memory. From here, we enter a realm that is both painful and beautiful. Childhood memory burden or miracle. There is a curious truth that most of us have experienced. You may remember a particular afternoon at 15 with great clarity, yet be unable to recall how you lived at the age of 4, as if early childhood were covered by a veil of mist. We call this amnesia, and we usually assume, quite simply, that a child's memory is weak and forgetting is normal. But for Jung, this gap is not merely a biological limitation. It is also the sign of a rupture, a loss of connection with the primordial soul part of ourselves, the part that perceived the world before the ego had time to build its defensive walls. Jung viewed childhood as a mine of psychological life, not because all problems are fatefully determined by childhood, but because childhood is where early emotions are inscribed into the body, into reflexes, into the way we come to believe in love, safety, and self-worth. If you grow up in an environment where emotions are dismissed, you learn to swallow them. If you grow up amid uncertainty, you learn vigilance. And if you grow up under the condition that you must be good to be loved, you learn to wear a mask. By adulthood, we believe we have outgrown childhood. Yet in truth, childhood has merely changed location. It lives in our fear of abandonment, in the way we punish ourselves, in the way we overexert to gain recognition. It is here that we understand why Jung did not regard the recovery of childhood memory as an excavation of the past meant to increase pain. For him, recovery meant restoring life to what had been frozen. Many childhood memories are not lost. They are severed from the conscious narrative because they were too intense, too chaotic, too difficult to name. A child does not have the vocabulary to say, "I feel worthless." It only feels a chill. And that chill grows up with the child. Years later, the adult still feels cold, but gives it different names. I am not good enough. I do not deserve. I must try harder. Yet Jung also emphasized something crucial to prevent us from falling into pessimism. Childhood is not only where trauma resides, it is also where the seeds of vocation are sown. The fantasies we tend to dismiss, role-playing games, imaginary worlds, beloved characters, childhood dreams, are sometimes the psyche's secret maps. For a child is not yet fully socialized. It meets the world through intuition, through symbols, through a language before words. And Jung, who deeply respected symbolic language, would see those fantasies as the first letters the soul writes to itself. Perhaps that is why Jung wrote a sentence both gentle and uncompromising, a reminder that within every adult there remains a part that has not yet grown, waiting to be cared for. In every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care, attention, and education. That is the part of the personality which wants to develop and become whole. Carl Jung, Depth Psychology. This sentence functions like a mirror. It does not blame you for still being wounded, nor scold you for not having moved on. It simply states the truth within you. Lives a child who is still becoming. And it is precisely that part that wants to develop and become whole. The problem is that we often try to fix ourselves by abandoning it once again. We force ourselves to be strong, to be rational, to move forward, to forget. But Jung would ask, in return, if the part that needs healing is the one that was abandoned, is forgetting it. Again, truly healing. Here sleep becomes a very special territory. By day, the ego is busy justifying, controlling, proving. By night, when the nervous system softens and consciousness relaxes its taut grip, the inner child is allowed to wander. Not wandering through memory as if replaying a film, but wandering through symbols, an old house, a narrow path, a garden, a classroom, a faintly heard call. Many people fear dreams because they are strange, because they defy logic. But from a Jungian perspective, dreams are sometimes simply the soul saying, "Give me a place to exist without judgment." And when we allow that a very quiet miracle occurs, we stop fighting ourselves. You do not need to force yourself to remember everything. You need only do one small thing. Acknowledge that there is a part of you that was once afraid, once lonely, once longing to be held, and that this part is still here. That acknowledgement, though not dramatic, is the first step toward reconciliation. It is like opening a door slightly, not to let the storm rush in, but to allow air to circulate. So, are childhood memories a burden or a miracle? Jung's answer would likely be both. A burden when they control us without our knowing. A miracle when we are gentle enough to see them as parts of life seeking integration, not erasure. Tonight, if you feel your mind drifting toward distant images, do not rush to pull it back with reason. Let that child pass through the peaceful kingdom of dreams as a way of coming home. And simply by not running away, you have already begun to become the adult that child once hoped for someone who knows how to listen. The mechanism of compensation. The psyche's self-regulation. When we begin to view childhood memories not only as a burden, but also as a living source of the soul, another subtle realization gradually emerges. The psyche does not allow imbalances to persist indefinitely. Wounds that have not been listened to, desires that have been neglected, parts of the self that have been repressed. All of these seek a way back, demanding adjustment. It is precisely here that Carl Gustav Jung introduces a foundational principle of analytical psychology, the mechanism of compensation, the intelligent self-regulation of the psyche. Jung believed that the human psyche does not function like a passive machine reacting to the world, but like a living ecosystem, constantly seeking to restore its own balance. When consciousness moves too far in one direction, too confident, too controlling, too rational, the unconscious moves in the opposite direction to re-establish equilibrium. Jung called this principle compensation. He wrote, "The compensation of consciousness by the unconscious is a self-regulation of the psychic system." In everyday life, we tend to evaluate ourselves through achievements and image. When things go well, the ego easily inflates. When we fail, it quickly collapses. But Jung argued that the psyche does not agree with such extremes. If by day you live in arrogance, believing yourself invulnerable by night, the unconscious may send dreams that make you small, lost, or face your own limitations. Conversely, if by day you diminish yourself, the unconscious may offer images of strength and support, reminding you of your worth. This is not punishment or reward, it is adjustment. From a Jungian perspective, dreams are therefore not the entertainment of a tired mind. They are inner rituals through which the psyche heals itself by correcting distorted attitudes of consciousness. Jung emphasized, dreams are the compensatory expression of the psyche. This explains why many dreams leave us perplexed. They do not cater to the ego. A person who is overly rational may dream in irrational images. Someone overly rigid may dream of crying. Someone overly controlling may dream of falling freely. Dreams do not aim to please, they aim to balance. And within that balance, a deeper intelligence is at work. Jung warned that when we ignore the compensatory mechanism, consequences accumulate. Dreams that are dismissed do not disappear. They transform into anxiety exhaustion or psychological accidents, uncontrolled reactions, decisions that repeat old scripts. He wrote, "The unconscious never tires of waiting, and it never gives up. Not because the unconscious is hostile, but because it is loyal to wholeness." When consciousness stubbornly walks alone, the unconscious knocks louder. But when we pause to listen, the intensity often diminishes. Compensation does not need to win. It needs to be acknowledged. What is crucial to understand is this compensation is not opposition. It does not seek to negate consciousness, but to complete it. Jung did not advocate living by the unconscious, nor did he worship absolute rationality. He sought cooperation between the two poles. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites." Within this context, sleep becomes the most natural space for cooperation. When the ego temporarily rests, the unconscious has room to carry out its adjustments without direct confrontation. This is why Jung advised us to trust the psyche's silent work. He said, "The psyche is a self-regulating system. Trust does not mean passivity. It means not intervening brutally. When a dream unsettles you, instead of pushing it away or rushing to decode it, ask, what is it compensating for in my daytime life? Am I being too certain, too rigid, too self-critical? That question asked with gentleness is already an act of cooperation. The mechanism of compensation also helps us understand why many people feel healed simply by sleeping. Not because dreams are always pleasant, but because balance is being restored. When daytime attitudes go astray, dreams correct them. When we listen, the system becomes softer, calmer. Jung believed that lasting healing rarely comes from force, but from subtle adjustment over time. In the modern world, where speed and control are celebrated, trusting the compensatory mechanism is an act of courage. It requires admitting that we do not control everything, and that this is acceptable. for there is a deeper intelligence working on behalf of your wholeness. Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Here the darkness may be nothing more than a temporary imbalance, an attitude taken too far. When we allow dreams to do their work, that darkness is integrated, not erased. Tonight, as you lie down, allow consciousness to loosen its grip a little. Trust that even when you are doing nothing, the psyche is still working diligently, intelligently. And in that trust, sleep is no longer an escape, but a ritual of returning to balance. When we come to understand that the psyche self-regulates through the mechanism of compensation, that nighttime dreams quietly correct the misaligned attitudes of the day, a broader horizon opens before us. Adjustment is not merely temporary balance, but a journey of transformation. Not every night is the same. There are nights that are deeper, darker, when the psyche does not simply mend cracks, but descends in order to renew itself. Jung called this path the night sea journey. 10. The night sea journey. Within the mythological and symbolic traditions Jung studied so thoroughly, there is a recurring motif. The hero must leave familiar light and enter darkness, descend into the night, see into deep caves, into the belly of the whale, before returning in a different form. Jung recognized in this motif a map of the inner life, especially as it unfolds in sleep. He wrote, "The descent into the unconscious is not a falling apart, but a coming together." From a Jungian perspective, sleep is not a void of consciousness, but a threshold of transformation. When consciousness temporarily withdraws, when the ego loosens its grip on roles and achievements, the psyche gains the opportunity to reconnect with ancient sources of wisdom, deeper layers where symbols, complexes, memories, and intuition converge. The night sea does not welcome us with bright lights. It invites us through ambiguity, and it is precisely this ambiguity that allows something new to be born. Jung described this journey through powerful images sinking into water, being swallowed by darkness, dwelling in the belly of the whale. These are not images of destruction. On the contrary, they are images of gestation, the womb of transformation. He emphasized, in the belly of the whale, the hero is not destroyed, but transformed. What dies here is not who you are, but old attitudes, rigid beliefs, expired, roles, ways of self-protection that no longer serve life. What is born is not a more glamorous version of yourself, but a new way of seeing, humbler, deeper, more whole. The night sea. Journey does not promise comfort. It promises truth. Not every night draws us into the night sea. Many nights perform only gentle, compensatory work. But there are phases when daytime life reaches an impasse, when the ego no longer has answers, in which the psyche invites us to go deeper. Jung regarded this as a sign of maturation. He wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Roots must touch darkness for the tree to grow tall." The night sea journey is therefore a reorientation from surface to depth. In deep sleep, as symbol follows symbol, the psyche is not entertaining itself. It is restructuring. Fragmented parts are reorganized. Opposites find their meeting point. This is why Jung called dreams a path toward wholeness. Dreams are the guiding words of the soul. What matters most is the attitude of the pilgrim. If we fear the darkness, we try to switch on the lights, to explain too quickly, to control too quickly, and the journey is interrupted. If we trust, we allow the darkness to do its work. Jung did not advise reckless plunges into the unconscious. He advised humility and patience. He reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In the night sea, making the darkness conscious does not mean shining a floodlight upon it, but remaining present long enough for it to speak on its own terms. Remaining with gentleness, not with the violence of reason. And then something remarkable occurs. Fear gradually subsides. Images settle, and a sense of being held emerges as if something larger than the ego were carrying you. Jung believed that the following morning, after a night spent crossing the night sea, you awaken not necessarily with answers, but with clarity, as if the mirror of the soul had been wiped clean. The problem may still exist, but your attitude has changed. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. In deep sleep, the two personalities that meet are consciousness and the unconscious. When a reaction occurs, both are altered. Consciousness becomes less rigid. The unconscious no longer needs to shout. And this change, however subtle, is the foundation of renewal. The night sea. Journey then is not a distant voyage. It takes place every night to the degree the psyche requires. Some nights, the water reaches only the ankles. Other nights, you must swim. Both are valid. What matters is not to resist. For to resist the night sea is to resist the deepest self-regulating wisdom within you. Tonight, as you close your eyes, if you feel yourself drifting, do not rush to cling to the shore. Remember that in the belly of the whale of the unconscious, you are not being destroyed. You are being transformed. And when dawn arrives, very softly, very quietly, you may realize that you are seeing the world with a new gaze, less defended, more alive. That is the silent gift of the night sea. After passing through the night sea journey, where the psyche is reborn in darkness and ambiguity, a subtle question arises. Once we return to shore, after that long night, what do we do with the images, the figures, the voices we encountered? If sleep is the path by which the unconscious draws us downward, then upon waking, Jung invites us to continue that encounter consciously, not to control the unconscious, but to enter into dialogue with it. And here, Jung introduces a method both bold and sacred: active imagination. 11. Active imagination. The sacred dialogue. Modern people often fear imagination. We label it daydreaming, unrealistic, or worse, escapism. But for Carl Gustav Jung, imagination is not an escape from reality. It is a doorway into a deeper reality of the psyche. When chaotic thoughts arise, our habitual response is to suppress them, analyze them, or distract ourselves. Jung proposed another path to stay and listen, not with rigid rationality, but through a living dialogue with inner images. Jung called this method active imagination. Unlike passive fantasy, active imagination requires the responsible presence of the ego. You do not let images drift aimlessly, nor do you impose your will upon them. You enter the imaginal world as you would enter a meeting between two living subjects. Jung wrote, "Active imagination is a way of getting at the contents of the unconscious. But getting it here does not mean seizing or appropriating. It means approaching with respect. In active imagination, the figures that appear, the child, the old man, the judge, the protector, are not psychological objects to be manipulated. They are voices representing different parts of the psyche." Jung emphasized that when we dialogue with them, the most important thing is not to pretend. He wrote, "You must not pretend that you know what the unconscious is thinking. You must let it speak for itself." It is precisely here that Jung's method becomes sacred, for it demands a rare quality, inner humility. The ego must accept that it is not the only voice. When we allow the unconscious to speak without judgment, tensions that were tightly compressed begin to dissolve, not because they are suppressed, but because they are understood. Jung observed, "Understanding is the bridge between conflict and integration. In life, many ghosts of the past do not disappear because we try to forget them. They persist because they have never been listened to." Active imagination transforms confrontation into dialogue. Instead of fleeing fear, you ask it what it wants. Instead of denying anger, you listen to what it protects. And when dialogue takes place, something unexpected often occurs. Images change, voices soften, and inner relationships are restructured. Jung wrote, "The figures of the unconscious are not dangerous in themselves. They become dangerous only when they are not understood." This does not mean that active imagination is always pleasant. At times, it brings us face to face with difficult truths. But unlike the violent intrusion of nightmares, active imagination unfolds within a contained space. The ego is present to witness, to ask, to respond. As a result, the unconscious no longer needs to shout through symptoms. It is invited to the table of conversation. Jung saw this as a crucial step in the process of individuation, when a person learns to live with the inner opposites. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites." In relation to sleep, active imagination functions as a daytime bridge to the night sea. Images that appear in dreams can be continued in dialogue while awake, not to decode them once and for all, but to nurture a relationship with them. When that relationship is established, the ghosts of the past memories, complexes, fears, gradually transform into companions. They no longer need to haunt because they now have a place. Jung issued a special warning against using active imagination as a technique for emotional manipulation. He emphasized the ethical dimension of inner life responsibility toward what is encountered. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To make the darkness conscious is not to conquer it, but to take responsibility for what one sees. When you dialogue with a sorrowful image, you are no longer permitted to abandon it again. It is precisely staying, not fleeing, that creates healing power. In today's hurried world, active imagination is a countercultural act. It requires slowing down, listening, and honoring depth. But Jung believed this is the path by which modern humans can escape inner alienation. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Active imagination does not create a different person. It helps you return to the parts that were forgotten. And when those parts are integrated, tension naturally subsides. No longer needing to strain for control, the mind discovers a deeper quiet, a quiet that does not come from avoidance, but from reconciliation. Tonight, as you prepare to drift into sleep, if an image appears, remember that you are not powerless before it. You may greet it, question it, listen to it, like a guest bearing a message. In this sacred dialogue, the unconscious is no longer a frightening dark region, but becomes a silent teacher. And as you allow this conversation to unfold, you may realize that the ghosts that once exhausted you are gradually learning to walk beside you, no longer to haunt, but to guide the way. When we have learned to step into a sacred dialogue with inner images, no longer fleeing, no longer imposing, a quiet truth gradually becomes clear. The purpose of all these encounters is not to satisfy curiosity, nor to fix individual problems one by one. All of them move toward a deeper point of convergence where scattered fragments find their rightful order. Jung called this point of convergence individuation, the path of returning to oneself in wholeness. 12. Individuation. Returning to oneself in wholeness. In the entire system of Carl Gustav Jung's thought, individuation is not a decorative concept. It is the axis around which psychological life turns. Jung did not view individuation as a moral goal becoming better, nor as a social achievement becoming successful. He regarded it as the psyche's task of survival, becoming the most authentic version of oneself, no longer governed by masks, complexes, or unconscious scripts. Individuation begins when a person realizes that the ego, though necessary, is not the center. That center, according to Jung, is the self, the principle of wholeness that encompasses both consciousness and the unconscious. When the ego believes itself to be the center, life becomes tense. When the ego learns to serve the self, life regains its natural rhythm. Jung wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the circumference of the whole psyche." This means that the self is both the point of convergence and the encompassing boundary it allows opposites to coexist. And therefore, individuation does not exclude the dark. It integrates the dark. Jung emphasized that there is no shortcut that bypasses the unconscious. He warned in a famous sentence, often quoted like a prophecy, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This statement is not meant to instill fear, but to return agency. When the unconscious remains neglected, it governs from behind the scenes. When it is recognized, it becomes a source of information. Individuation, therefore, is not about controlling the unconscious, but about establishing a right relationship with it. On this journey, a person must face two poles: the bright side in which one takes pride, and the dark side one avoids. Jung called this dark side the shadow, not pure evil, but that which has not yet been lived. When the shadow is denied, it manifests in distorted ways. When it is integrated, it releases energy. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Individuation demands inner moral courage the courage to look directly at one's contradictions without self-condemnation. For the self does not demand perfection. It demands honesty. Jung stressed that this path is profoundly personal and cannot be copied. He wrote, "Individuation does not shut one out from the world, but gathers the world to oneself." In other words, individuation does not make you selfish, it makes you present. When people live far from the self, they must strain to conform. When they live close to the self, they become natural, and it is precisely this naturalness that carries healing power for others. Within this context, sleep is no longer mere rest. It becomes a ritual of returning to the center. At night, when the ego releases its roles, the self has space to adjust, to reconnect strained threads. Jung viewed dreams as micro-maps of the individuation process, showing where the relationship between consciousness and the unconscious currently stands. He wrote, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul. Not every night brings us to the center, yet every night moves us slightly closer." Individuation does not occur in a single flash of illumination. It unfolds through the accumulation of quiet nights. When we listen, the unconscious no longer needs to shout. When we dialogue, complexes lose their grip. When we integrate, energy returns to serve life. Jung also warned of the trap of inflation, when the ego mistakes deep inner experience for personal grandeur. Genuine individuation is accompanied by humility. He wrote, "The meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow." And it is precisely this unglamorous encounter that forms the foundation. From there, a person learns to live with contradiction rather than deny it, learns to choose rather than merely react. The self does not erase suffering, but it places suffering within a meaningful context. Tonight, as you prepare to sink into sleep, remember that you do not need to become someone else in order to be whole. Wholeness does not lie in a distant future. It already exists as a potential. Sleep does not carry you away from life. It brings you closer to the center, where fragmented parts are gently held together. Jung once spoke a sentence both simple and profound. "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Individuation, therefore, is not a destination to be conquered. It is a direction in which to live. And each night, you allow yourself to loosen control, to listen, and to trust. You take another step, very small, very quiet, on the path of returning to yourself in wholeness. Your mind is like a small boat upon an infinite ocean. The ego is the helmsman who has worked all day and now needs rest. And the ocean of the personal unconscious, vast and patient, will quietly rock that boat, guiding it back to the harbor of wholeness. Take a deep breath. Let go of all calculations. There is nothing more you need to understand right now. Simply allow the gentle current of memory to lead the way. Let the breath slow, and let sleep arrive like a familiar greeting. In that quiet, you do not disappear, you return. If tonight's journey touches you in the lightest way, allow it to continue flowing. You may return whenever you need a quiet space to listen to yourself. Wishing you a deep, luminous night of sleep and a gentle reunion with yourself.